Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show that I want to start with a couple of questions. Are you tired of trying to make things work with your partner if your partner doesn't seem invested? Right? Do you feel like you're doing all the work to try to make the relationship better or to make it work? Do you feel like you've grown apart in your relationship? Do you wish you had like black and white signs to tell you, yes, this is the right thing, you should stay there, or no, you should leave, right? Are you confused? If you're wondering whether it's time to leave your relationship, then this episode of The Terri Cole Show is for you, because in today's video, I'm going to be talking about questions that you can ask to determine whether it's time to leave or whether your relationship sort of can be saved. I'm going to be talking you through different ways that you can reorient yourself so you can get to the truth of how you actually feel, because a lot of times that's a big problem, and how to break through the confusion you might be feeling about whether you should stay or whether you should go in your relationship. So, for those of you, if you happen to be new here, my name is Terri Cole. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, relationship expert, the author of Boundary Boss and the Boundary Boss Workbook, and the forthcoming Too Much, a guide to breaking the cycle of high-functioning codependency, which is coming out October 15th, 2024. So please keep your eyes open. I cannot wait. So many of you have said that you cannot wait as well. So together we are super excited about the new book. You can pre-order the new book right now at hfcbook.com, right? That stands for High Functioning Codependency Book.com, hfcbook.com. Easy breezy. Go to it. It also helps me if you like my channel, if you like what I'm doing. Pre-orders help authors because it tells the book sellers that there are people who are going to buy this book. So yes, please go. In the meantime, if you're new to my channel, please introduce yourself in the comments. We're a friendly group. I read everything, you guys know. I really want you to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that when I roll out new stuff, which is every Tuesday and every Thursday, you will get notified, which I make them for you. So I want you to know that they're coming, right? I also want to say thank you so much for all your questions, all your interactions right here, and I love to highlight your comments and your questions. So today we're highlighting one from Georgiana M., and this is under the video, The Truth About Mother Wounds and 3 Ways to Heal is the name of the video. I absolutely love your videos. I feel that you are describing what I've been feeling for so long, but I'm unable to express or explain. Thank you for everything you do. Je t'adore. I think that means I adore you. Well, thank you, Georgiana. I adore you too, and I appreciate you taking the time to write that comment. It really does warm my heart. All right, let's move it on into today's content. Before we start, a quick note about abusive relationships, because what I'm talking about today is more about unsatisfying relationships or misaligned relationships, less about abusive relationships. So if you're in an abusive relationship, I have a video that I made that guides you through the entire process of how to safely leave an abusive relationship, and all that info will be in the show notes for you. So your safety is literally of the utmost importance, no matter what it is that you're doing. It has got to be. Really, take it from me. If you're in an abusive relationship, you wanting to leave is nothing to feel guilty about. You just need to do it in a safe, strategic, slow way, right? Do not reveal your plan or thoughts on leaving your person if they are abusive. So go to that video and I give you a step-by-step process and lots of resources so that you can do it safely. So I just wanted to say that so that we're all on the same page of what we are talking about today in this episode. All right, so let's talk about dissatisfaction in relationships, because I do hear a lot from you guys that you're confused whether you should stay or go. You're not feeling satisfied in your relationship, but you do love the person. So what are the things that cause dissatisfaction in our relationships? Maybe your partner isn't pulling their weight, right? Maybe they're not showing interest in your thoughts or your opinions. Maybe they don't listen when you talk. Maybe they don't care about your preferences. Maybe they're outright dismissing how you feel, right? Or maybe they're just focused on being right? If you fight together, maybe they just want to be right rather than about listening to how you feel. Or maybe you're that way, right? This is not just sort of quote unquote blaming the other. This is really, I hope this episode of the Terri Cole Show will be an opportunity for you to really look at what's happening in your relationship, because there are ways to break this down. That's what I'm walking you through today, where so many times people will come into therapy with me and just they've been so blocked for so long, have felt unsatisfied in their relationship for so long, but feel paralyzed. They don't know what to do. They don't know if the way they're feeling is right or if it's wrong. So this is what we're breaking down. I mean, anytime that you feel frustrated or you feel like you're in pain in a relationship, this is bringing your attention, right, to something that needs care, that needs thought, that needs your attention. And regardless of whether your partner understands the way that you feel, you have a right to the way that you feel. And it's important that you know how you feel and why you feel that way. So when you have a concern in your relationship, maybe you have one right now, the first question I have for you is, have you voiced that concern? Because so much of the time when I ask potential therapy clients or my therapy clients, if they've talked about it, they say no. Or they say, I've tried, but they're not open to having these types of conversations. So let's look at it. If we're not bringing it up, let's talk about that. What happens, right? When we don't speak authentically or directly and effectively, it can put us sort of out of step with our partner, because I can see it with my, I've had a million years of therapy and I've been a therapist for almost 3 decades. And I can still see that at times, if I have something to say to Vic and I feel like he won't like it or he'll be upset about it, that I find myself acting out in other ways. Not all the time, but like I'll get annoyed about something else. Like it can still be challenging to be direct, even in a very good and healthy relationship. So that's something, communication itself is something that we all have to take responsibility for ourselves, right? We can't just say my partner isn't good at it, because we've got to be good at it ourselves. And of course, then we can invite our partners into a real dialogue. But clarity, you need clarity about what is frustrating you, about what is not working for you. And I have a guide that goes along with this episode. So I'm going to give you ways of figuring that stuff out in the guide, terricole.com/guide. So how do we get clarity? Well, you really need to drop in to your own internal experience. What is the dialogue in your mind about your relationship, about how you're feeling? What is happening? And I find that to access that information, one of the ways that may not seem like a direct portal to it, but I'm telling you it really does help, is some kind of a daily mindfulness practice. Most of you know, if you know my story, I meditate every day. I feel like this creates a very fertile internal environment for us to hear what's actually happening, right? And you have to want to know. And I think a lot of the times that I'm gonna get to this next, I'll be talking about the cloud of confusion that comes when we're trying to decide whether to stay or go in a relationship. But we want to do things like meditation and mindfulness and even moving your body. These are all things that can help create mental clarity. We have to slow down enough to be able to even hear our thoughts and what we think. Another thing to think about is, if you stay in your relationship, if you're deciding whether to stay or go, if you stay in the relationship, can you imagine that the relationship can be revived? Right? I have seen relationships that look like they are flatlining, like you would never think they had a chance to come back. And when the partners change their mind about what they want to do, the relationship, I've seen relationships go from so close to death to actually thriving. Like, I know as a therapist, I know that this is possible, but we need to figure out, and each couple is different, what steps would you need to take to resurrect the relationship, right? Let that sit for you. How does that feel when you think about doing something new? It's funny, and even if you're talking about how to make your relationship better, right? It doesn't just have to be, are you staying or are you going? That happens to be the topic of this episode. But I also want you to think about resurrecting a relationship even if it's a good relationship, but you know it could be better or more passionate or more satisfying, we have to look in and go, what am I willing to do myself to make that happen? I was reading something that the Gottman Institute put out, that couples who kiss for 6 seconds a day are more intimate than couples who don't. And that may not sound like a lot of time, but if you're in a long-term relationship, and even if you're still sexual and have sex, the whole thing about kissing, just kissing for kissing's sake, a lot of times that can get lost when the first 5 to 10 or 15 years of the relationship is done. And we have brought that back into our relationship, and I have to say, it's really fun. And it really does resurrect something. It almost reminds me of when I was 28 or 30 or whatever, and between us. So there's things that you can do, but of course, for it to work, we both have to be willing to play along when the other person is like, all right, let's, jumping in for my 6 seconds, Anyway, moving into how do we break through the cloud of confusion? Because being a psychotherapist for 27 years, I can tell you the number of times clients have come in and said that they are confused, quote unquote, about their relationship, or that they're torn and that they really love the person, but they're not sure what to do. What I have discovered is a lot of times, if it's painful for you to know the truth about the relationship, you may use confusion as like a mask to not deal with it. That a lot of times, and if I just pose a direct question in therapy, which I sometimes do, it depends on the client and as to how, what intervention I would choose. But I've honestly said, do you think it's already too late? Because a lot of times people will come in after the fact. They've already put up with stuff or been in a dysfunctional relational pattern with this person for so many years that every year you do that, you're basically scraping away at the foundation and at the love that is in the relationship, where a lot of times the love starts being replaced with resentment, anger, frustration, disappointment, all of those sort of negative emotions. And probably half the time that I've said to a client, do you honestly think it's already done for you? That they've said, yes, but I'm afraid of what that means. I'm like, okay, well, we can know the truth and still choose to do nothing. We can take it slow, right? Let that truth sit, because sometimes when you admit the truth, then other possibilities can come from there, right? But it's in denying that truth and saying I'm confused when really what you think is over the situation. That's different. So we have to be honest with ourselves and our partners, right? But honest with yourself first, right? If you're initiating time away or a break, maybe you do live together, maybe you don't. If you do, maybe you're initiating moving out. I was just working with a couple where it really looked like they were done. The husband moved out, and now they're really working on their relationship in a totally different way. And for that couple, they needed space. They needed to break out of this 15-year pattern that they'd gotten into in their living situation where there's all kinds of bickering and fighting all the time. And just having the break so that they each had some peace created this space that they could come back together. And suddenly you could remember what was good about the relationship when you weren't fighting all the time. And then getting into therapy together is a possibility, and figuring out effective communication skills and whatever it is. So honest conversations are incredibly important. And here's the thing. When you're in a situation where you're not sure how it's going to go, it's very scary. And as human beings, we love certainty. We want certainty, right? This is what we want. And yet, relationships are fluid living beings, right? They're entities unto themselves. And you may not know what's going to happen. And that's okay. So it's sort of easier to hang out in the confusion a lot of times than it is to take decisive action. But I'm not saying those are your only choices. I think communication and getting clear about how you feel, that's probably the most important stuff. But if you have had prolonged feelings of confusion in your relationship, this can speak to your attachment style and other things as well. But it also speaks to the fact that something in your relationship and within yourself needs your attention. right? Because a lot of times people will come into therapy and talk about, well, this part of the relationship is great and other parts are terrible. And it's like, before people get married, I would always ask my clients, especially if it's a volatile relationship where they feel like it's going to change, right? Like it's going to change. The relationship is going to change. The person is going to change. And my feeling is they may not change. So I'll always say, if your level of satisfaction from this day forward never changed the level you're at right now, would that be enough for you? And if the answer is yes, then great. Sounds like a good idea. And if the answer is no, then my feeling is put the brakes on until you can figure out how to create more satisfaction and better communication or sex or whatever it is that you're struggling with. Because a lot of times people will come in and say that their partner promises to change and that they're working on the thing or that they're not going to do it again, whatever it is. Someone had come in, this is years ago, someone had come in and said, what do you think about my partner saying, we had an incident where our fighting escalated and they hit me. My partner hit me, but they swear to God it'll never happen again. And they're so sad and so contrite and they're crying and they're so this. And now that made me very nervous. And I was like, somebody losing control of themselves to that degree, they may not have, it's not about willpower to stop. Usually with abuse, it starts and then it escalates. And so that's where therapy really, to me, would be if they wouldn't get into therapy, would be a deal breaker. And so a lot of other people would say if somebody hits you once, you should just end the relationship. And I think that's easier said than done for a lot of people because there may be other things about the person. So I'm not saying stay in an abusive relationship. I am saying if someone has anger issues and if there's a problem, the proof can't be in what they're saying, right? The proof can't be in their words. The proof has to be in their actions. So, and it's the same thing if you're dealing with someone who, let's say, is drinking too much and they say they're going to slow it down, but they don't. You have to have a conversation to let them know what happens for you, right? I don't know what happens for you if you're with someone who drinks too much, but for me, if I was with someone who drinks too much, it's very boring. It's the opposite of an aphrodisiac. It is uninteresting. And you can talk about how the drinking or the excess, whether it's drinking or drugs or smoking weed or whatever it is, if that is how it's impacting how you feel about them in the relationship. And I feel like they have a right to know that. And if it's becoming a deal breaker for you for real, they also have a right to know that, We really have to look at how much of the relationship is painful, how much of the relationship is joyful. This is what can really help you figure out whether you should stay or whether you should go, right? Does the good outweigh the bad? Which sounds really pedestrian, is that it? No, of course that's not it, but that is something to think about. In the guide, and I'm going to go over a couple of them now, but I've given you 15 questions to ask yourself to really help you really drop in, dive deep into whether you should stay or go. So let's just start with the first one. If there were no consequences to your decision, does your gut say to stay or to leave? Just think about that. Or where are you on that confusion scale that I talked about? Or when was the last time you actually had fun with your partner, where you were actually laughing together and enjoying time? Because there's a lot of things that fall by the wayside when we can get into the grind of life. And this can also happen with different life cycles. When you're raising little kids, it can be really difficult. When you're going through menopause, it can be really difficult. If there's a health crisis for either one of you, that can be difficult too. So there's many curveballs that life throws to couples. But it's valuable to look at how you handle those curveballs together. Do you work as a team? Can you work as a team? And even just most recently, Vic and I got a puppy about 9 months ago, and we haven't had a puppy or little kids, like kids in general, for years. And how it brought a whole different dimension to our relationship again, remembering what a dutiful caregiver he is, always thinking about, and it sounds silly to be always thinking about the puppy, that sounds ridiculous, but it lets me see him in this different positive light, and how much I loved partnering with him when we were raising kids, and what great qualities he has. So a lot of times your situations that you're in can bring out those good qualities where it's easier for you to see them in your partner. And a lot of times too, we get lazy in relationships, both parties, where it's just easy to sort of focus on what they're doing wrong. And I think that we can get committed to focusing also on what the other person is doing right. So I'm not saying bypass what's wrong, but I am saying we want to find a way to balance the scales when it comes to that. So for you guys, go to the guide. It has all 15 of these questions for you. terricole.com/guide. Remember, my brand new book, Too Much, is available for pre-order right now. You can go to hfcbook.com, which stands for High Functioning Codependency Book. And you can see, if you're watching me on YouTube, that's the cover. Too Much, a guide to breaking the cycle of high-functioning codependency. And it actually publishes on October 15th, 2024. But I'm super excited for you guys to put in your pre-order. Please do. In the meantime, I hope you guys have the most amazing week. And as always, take care of you.